In a distant land, there lived a man deemed perfect and upright in the eyes of God. He had everything a man could desire: a united family, immeasurable wealth, and the undeniable blessing of God. He lived in peace, secure, set apart from evil. But could true faith exist without being tested? In the heavenly heights, a profound question arose. A formidable challenge was cast. Did Job truly believe that God honored and revered him without self-interest? Did he do so merely because of who God is, without expecting any reward or earthly gain in return? The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. In a single devastating day, he lost his wealth. In a single day, he lost all his children. But the hardest test was yet to strike his own flesh. His wife urged him, "Curse God and die." Friends came to comfort him, suggesting, "Job, you must have sinned." But their words were like salt in the wound. Job cried out, "Why?" When human voices fell silent, when the wisdom of man failed, the Creator himself broke the silence, asking, "Where were you?" Can a man remain faithful after losing everything? How far does God's justice reach, and his mercy? What happens when a man comes face to face with the Almighty? There was indeed a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. This man was perfect and upright in the eyes of God. He was one who deeply honored God and strived to turn away from all evil. He was not just a good man. He was considered the most blameless of all the men in that eastern region. And God had blessed him abundantly. He had a large and united family, 7 sons and 3 daughters, and he was a very wealthy man. He owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 female donkeys, along with a great many servants. In fact, Job was the greatest and richest man in all the East. His sons would hold feasts, each on his appointed day, inviting their brothers and sisters to eat and drink together. These were days of joy and celebration. But Job, as a godly father, was concerned for the spiritual well-being of his children. And when the days of feasting were over, Job would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings to God, one for each of his children, thinking, "Perhaps my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." But one day, while Job lived his upright life on earth, something significant happened in the heavenly realms. The sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. The Lord questioned Satan, asking, "From where do you come?" Satan replied that he had been going to and fro on the earth, and from walking back and forth on it. The Lord then directed his attention to Job, saying, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is none like him on the earth, a perfect and upright man, one who fears God and turns away from evil." Satan challenged the Lord, asking, "Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not placed a hedge around him? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand now and touch all that he has, and surely he will curse you to your face." The Lord, in his sovereignty, allowed the test, saying, "Very well, behold, all that he has is in your hand, but do not touch his person." And the accuser, having received this permission, went out from the presence of the Lord, ready to carry out his evil plan. Now it happened one day, while Job's sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine joyfully in the house of their eldest brother, that tragedy struck with devastating force and unimaginable speed. Messengers arrived one after another. One reported that while they were plowing with the oxen and the donkeys were grazing nearby, the Sabaeans had suddenly attacked, taking them all and striking down the servants with the sword. Only he had escaped to tell Job. Another messenger followed, reporting that fire from God had fallen from heaven, burning up the sheep and the shepherds and consuming them completely, and only he had escaped. Yet another arrived, stating that the Chaldeans had attacked the camels, taking them away and striking down the servants with the edge of the sword, and only he had escaped. Finally, the most heart-wrenching news came. All Job's children were eating in the house of their eldest brother when suddenly a great wind came from the desert, struck the house, causing it to collapse on the young people, and all of them were dead. Only he had escaped to tell Job. Then Job, in an expression of deep sorrow and mourning, tore his robe. He shaved his head, and then, in a remarkable act of faith in the midst of unimaginable tragedy, he fell to the ground on his face and worshipped God, declaring, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." Despite all his losses, Job did not sin, nor did he blame God for what had happened. His faith, for now, remained firm. But the trial had only just begun. After some time, the sons of God once again came to present themselves before the Lord, and the accuser, Satan, also came among them to present himself before him. The Lord again questioned Satan about his movements on the earth. He then asked Satan if he had considered his servant Job, noting that there was still no one like him on the earth, a perfect and upright man, one who feared God and turns away from evil, and still he held fast to his integrity, even though God had been incited against him to ruin him without cause. Satan responded with a chilling proverb saying, "Skin for skin. Indeed, all that a man has he will give for his life. But stretch out your hand now and touch his bone and his flesh, and surely he will curse you to your face." And the Lord, allowing the trial to continue to reveal the depth of Job's faith, agreed but set an unbreakable limit, declaring, "Behold, he is in your hand. Do with his body as you will, but spare his life. Do not take it." So Satan struck Job with painful and malignant sores, grievous and excruciating sores, from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. His once healthy body became a mass of agony and affliction, and Job, in his misery, sat among the ashes. He took a piece of broken pottery to scrape himself with it, seeking an impossible relief from his torment. His wife, witnessing his unbearable suffering, urged him, "Do you still hold fast to your integrity? What good has it done you? Look at yourself, curse God already, and die." But Job rebuked her, saying, "You speak as one of the foolish women speaks.
Shall we indeed accept good from God, and shall we not accept adversity as well?"
Despite the unbearable physical suffering and the bitter words of his wife, Job did not sin with his lips. He did not curse God. Soon after, 3 of Job's friends, Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite, heard of all the calamity that had come upon him. They came together from their homes to mourn with him and to comfort him in his affliction. But when they saw him from a distance, they did not recognize him. The man they once knew, wealthy, dignified, and strong, was now a figure of utter misery. And upon seeing him like this, they broke out in loud weeping. They tore their robes in grief and sprinkled dust on their heads toward heaven. Then they sat with him on the ground for 7 days and 7 nights. They remained there in complete silence. No one spoke a word to him, for they saw that his suffering was very great. And in that moment, words seemed meaningless. They honored his pain with a shared silence. But the anguish held within Job's heart was like a dam about to burst. At last, after that long week of silent agony, Job opened his mouth. But he did not curse God as the accuser had expected. Instead, he cursed the day he was born, lamenting, "Let the day perish on which I was born, and the night that said, 'A male child has been conceived.' May that day be darkness. May God above not seek it, nor light shine upon it. Why did I not die in the womb? Why did I not perish when I came out of the belly? For now I would have lain still and been quiet. I would have slept. Then I would have been at rest. Why is light given to those in misery, and life to the bitter in soul, who long for death but it does not come, who rejoice exceedingly when they find the grave? For my sigh come before I eat, and my groanings pour out like water. I have no peace, no quietness. I have no rest, but only turmoil has come upon me." It was the cry of a tortured soul, a man who had lost all hope in this life and wished he had never lived. Job's words, filled with pain yet not directly blaming God, broke the silence and opened the door for his friends to finally speak. The first to respond was Eliphaz the Temanite, likely the eldest and most experienced of the three. He asked Job if he would be offended should they speak. He noted that Job had instructed many and strengthened weak hands, but now that trouble had come upon him, he was dismayed. Eliphaz suggested that he had seen those who plow iniquity and sow trouble reap the same, implying that though they did not see it, some sin must have brought this upon Job. He advised Job to seek God and to commit his cause to him, for God does great and unsearchable things. If Job would return to him and confess his fault, Eliphaz believed God would deliver and restore him. Job listened to his friend, but the words, though well-intentioned, brought no comfort, only more anguish. He felt their words wounded him more than they comforted. He challenged them to show where he had erred, stating that their arguments proved nothing and that he had not sinned to deserve this. He spoke of his life as short and full of misery, asking why God had set him as a target for his arrows, wishing that God would crush him once and for all, believing that would be his only comfort. Then Bildad the Shuhite spoke. Unlike Eliphaz, his arguments rested not so much on personal experience, but on traditional wisdom, on what the ancestors had taught about God's justice. He questioned how long Job would speak such things, asking if God perverted justice or twisted what is right. He suggested that if Job's children had sinned against God, he gave them over to the penalty of their sin. But if Job were pure and upright, and now sought God and pleaded with him, surely he would arise for him and make his righteous dwelling prosperous. Bildad urged Job to trust in the wisdom of the ancients, asserting that God does not reject the blameless, nor does he uphold the hand of evildoers. Job responded by acknowledging the truth of God's power and justice, stating, "Surely I know it is so, but how can a man be righteous before God?" He felt that if he wished to contend with him, he could not answer him one time in 1,000. He described God as wise in heart and mighty in strength, moving mountains, shaking the earth, walking upon the waves of the sea. Job questioned who he was to answer him, feeling that though he were righteous, his own mouth would condemn him, and if he claimed to be blameless, God would prove him perverse. He saw God destroying the blameless and the wicked alike, and questioned what good it was then to be upright, feeling crushed. Finally, in this first cycle of debate, Zophar the Naamathite spoke. He was the most direct and harsh of the three, openly accusing Job of harboring hidden sin and claiming he deserved even greater punishment. He wondered if Job's empty words should silence men, asking if Job would claim his doctrine was pure and he was clean in God's sight. He wished that God would speak and open his lips against Job, believing God would then show him the secrets of wisdom and he would realize that God was punishing him far less than his iniquity deserved. Zophar urged Job to put away the evil that was in his hand and repent. Job replied that he had heard all this before, empty words that wounded rather than comforted. He felt his friends thought themselves wise, as though only they understood, but he also had knowledge and was not beneath them. He felt they mocked him, the one who had called on God and received his answer. He suggested that if they were in his place, perhaps they would speak the same words with scorn, but he insisted he would not. He would comfort them, ease their pain with honest words. Instead, he felt they had left him alone, worn out, marked by suffering. His own friends had turned against him, and he was left to weep before God, seeking the compassion they had not shown. He lamented that his days were gone, and with them the dreams and desires he once held in his heart. His spirit was broken, his strength was fading, and the grave seemed to wait for him. If he had any hope left, he felt it lay buried with the dead. He had called the darkness his father and the worms his mother and sister, questioning where his hope was now and who could see any light in him when all within him had been extinguished. Though Job could not fully understand God and felt wounded by him, he still clung to God's ultimate character and a future hope. He declared, "But I know that my Redeemer lives, and that in the end he will stand upon the dust to defend me. And though my skin is destroyed, yet in my flesh I shall see God. I shall see him for myself with my own eyes, and not another's. Though my heart faints within me at the very thought." Job was willing to trust God, even if that trust led him to death. But he would not renounce his integrity. After his friends finished their accusations, Job gave his final defense. It was not a direct reply to their arguments, but a solemn declaration of innocence, his final effort to clear his name before men and affirm his righteousness. He stated that he had made a covenant with his eyes, so he could not look upon a young woman with lust. He asserted that if he had walked in falsehood or rushed into deceit, God could weigh him in honest scales and would see that he was blameless. He listed numerous examples of righteous conduct. If his heart was led astray by his eyes or his hands were stained with greed, if he had been unfaithful or secretly desired another man's wife or lingered near her door, if he had denied justice to his servants when they brought a complaint or ignored the cry of the poor, if he had caused the widow's tears or kept his bread for himself and not shared with the orphan, if he had put his trust in gold or said to fine gold, "You are my security," or if he rejoiced at the ruin of his enemy, then he would accept judgment. But he insisted he had not done these things. He ended by calling out, "Oh, that someone would listen to me! Here is my signature. Let the Almighty answer me. Let my accuser write out his charges. I am ready to face the truth." Job had rested his case before men. He had defended his integrity to the end. Despite the pain and the accusations, his three friends fell silent, having nothing more to say. But the silence that followed would not be the end of the conversation. There was now present a younger man named Elihu, son of Barachel the Buzite. Elihu had waited respectfully without speaking, for the others were older than he. But now, seeing that there was no answer, and feeling that Job had justified himself more than he had justified God, Elihu burned with anger. He admitted he was young and they were older, which was why he held back at first, afraid to speak, thinking, "Let age speak, let years teach wisdom." But now he saw that it was not always so. It was not only the old who are wise, nor the aged who understand what is right. There is a spirit in man, and the breath of the Almighty gives him understanding. So he asked them to listen to him now, for he too had something to say. He had been silent, waiting for their words, listening to every argument. But none of them had refuted Job or clearly answered what he had spoken. And to Job, he declared that he had justified himself rather than God. Therefore, the time had come for him to speak. Elihu emphasized that God is far greater than man. He questioned why Job insisted on arguing with him, stating that God does not owe us explanations for what he does. And yet, Elihu affirmed, God does speak in many ways, though we may not always perceive it. He speaks through dreams, through visions in the night, and also through suffering. When a person lies afflicted upon a bed through pain, God can turn a person away from wrongdoing, rescue their soul from the grave, teach them humility, and correct their path. It is part of how he disciplines and saves. Elihu asserted it was far from God to do wrong, from the Almighty to commit evil. He repays each according to their deeds, and surely God does no injustice. He pleaded with Job to listen, to pause for a moment, and consider the wonders of God, whose greatness is beyond human comprehension. As Elihu continued speaking, describing the majesty of God revealed through creation, something began to shift in the atmosphere. He spoke of beholding the wonders of God, asking Job if he knew how God commanded them, how he made his lightning shine through the clouds, if he understood the balance of the heavens, the marvelous works of him who is perfect in knowledge. He urged Job to look upon the clouds, the vastness of the sky, to hear the thunder from God's dwelling place. The storm, he described, proclaims God's presence. His voice resounds with power. He covers the light with his clouds, and suddenly comes the crash, a voice that pierces the heavens. He directs his lightning to the ends of the earth, and then comes the majestic roar of thunder. Elihu declared that God thunders wondrously with his voice. He does great things too lofty for our understanding. The Almighty, he concluded, is beyond our reach. His power is vast. His judgment is just. His righteousness overflowing. And when he disciplines, it is never without purpose. That is why men tremble before him, for his greatness is glorious and unsearchable. After so much silence, after so many human debates, God himself was about to speak. The storm described by Elihu was no ordinary storm. It was a whirlwind, charged with the power and majesty of the Creator. And then, from the very heart of the roaring tempest, the Lord finally answered Job, asking, "Who is this who darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Now gird up your loins like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me." God led Job on a profound journey through the wonders of creation. He asked Job, "Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me, if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? Who shut in the sea with doors when it burst forth from the womb and said to it, 'This far you may come, but no farther, and here shall your proud waves stop'? Have you commanded the morning since your days began? Have you shown the dawn its place? Have you entered the storehouses of the snow, or seen the storehouses of the hail? Can you bind the cluster of the Pleiades, or loose the cords of Orion? Do you give the horse his strength? Do you clothe his neck with a flowing mane? Does the hawk fly by your wisdom and stretch her wings toward the south? Does the eagle soar at your command and make its nest on high? Behold now Behemoth, which I made along with you. His strength is in his loins. Can you pierce his nose with a snare? Can you draw out Leviathan with a hook? Can you put a cord through his nose? Will he make a covenant with you to be your servant forever? No one is so fierce that he dares stir him up. Who then is able to stand against me? Faced with the overwhelming majesty and power of God revealed in his creation, Job humbled himself. He responded, "Behold, I am insignificant. What shall I answer you? I lay my hand over my mouth. Once I have spoken, but I will not answer. Yes, twice, but I will proceed no further. After the Lord had shown Job his immense power and wisdom through the marvels of creation, Job understood. He did not receive a direct answer as to why he had suffered so greatly, but he received something far greater, a direct revelation of who God is. And that revelation changed his entire perspective. With deep humility and a truly repentant heart, Job responded to the Lord one final time, declaring, "I know that you can do all things, and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me which I did not know. Hear me, I pray, and I will speak. I will question you, and you shall teach me. I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes." It was a repentance not for specific sins, but for having spoken in ignorance, for having questioned God's wisdom and justice from a limited human perspective. Now he had seen God, and that was enough. Following this divine encounter, the Lord addressed Eliphaz and his two friends, saying, "My anger burns against you and your two friends, because you have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has." God affirmed that despite his pain and his questions, Job had wrestled honestly and spoken more truthfully about his character than the friends did with their easy and mistaken answers. Therefore, God commanded them to take 7 bulls and 7 rams, go to his servant Job, and offer up a burnt offering for themselves, and God's servant Job would pray for them, for surely God would accept him so that he would not deal with them according to their folly, because they had not spoken of him what was right as his servant Job had. So Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar went and did as the Lord had commanded them. They prepared the sacrifices to seek forgiveness for their misguided words, and then, showing extraordinary grace and forgiveness after all the pain they had caused with their accusations, Job prayed for his friends. In that act of obedience and forgiveness, Job's restoration began. The Lord restored all that Job had and gave him twice as much as before. His prosperity returned in abundance. He had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 female donkeys. God returned to him double all that the accuser had taken. And he also restored his family. Job had again 7 sons and 3 daughters. They named the first Jemimah, the second Keziah, and the third Karen-Happuch. Nowhere in all the land were found women as beautiful as the daughters of Job, and in a remarkable gesture of favor, their father gave them an inheritance among their brothers. After this, Job lived 140 years. He saw his children and their children to the 4th generation, a long and full life, a sign of God's restored blessing. And Job died, old and full of days, satisfied with the life that God had given and restored to him. The story of Job is a profound journey through the deepest suffering and the most refined faith. It teaches us that even when we do not understand God's ways or the reasons for our suffering, He remains sovereign, just, and ultimately good. It shows us that genuine faith is not the absence of doubt or questions, but the ability to cling to God even in the darkest night. It reminds us that an honest relationship with God, even if it includes lament, is more valuable than easy answers that are false. And above all, it leaves us with the hope that just as Job saw his Redeemer and was restored, we too can find redemption, restoration, and a deep personal knowledge of God, even after life's hardest trials. Faithfulness in the fire, though painful, produces tested character and a hope that does not disappoint.